Chapter 13 of High Adventure, a narrative of air fighting in France, by James Norman Hall. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mike Vendetti, MikeVendetti.com. High Adventure, a narrative of air fighting in France, by James Norman Hall. Chapter 13. From a letter received in Boston, October 1st, 1918. Officers Kriegsgrafen Glenlager, Karlsruhe, Balden, Deutschland, July 27th, 1918. I've been wondering about the ultimate fate of my poor old High Adventure story, whether it was published without those long-promised concluding chapters which I really should have sent on hand had I not had the misfortune to be taken prisoner. I hope the book has been published, incomplete as it is. Not that I am particularly proud of it as a piece of literature. I told you briefly on my card how I happened to be taken prisoner. We were a patrol of 3, and attacked a German formation at some distance behind their lines. I was diving vertically on an Albatross when my upper right plane gave way under the strain. Fortunately, the structure of the wing did not break. It was only the fabric covering it, which ripped off in great strips. I immediately turned towards our lines and should have reached them, I believe, even in my crippled condition. But by that time I was very low and under a heavy fire from the ground. A German anti-aircraft battery made a direct hit on my motor. It was a terrific smash and almost knocked the motor out of the frame. My machine went down in a spin, and I had another of those moments of intense fear common to the experience of aviators. Well, by Jove, I hardly know how I managed it, but I kept from crashing nose down. I struck the ground at an angle of about 30 degrees. The motor, which was just hanging on, spilled out, and I went skidding along, with the fuselage of the machine, the landing chassis having been snapped off as though the braces were so many toothpicks. One of my ankles was broken and the other one sprained, and my poor old nose received and withstood a severe contact with my windshield. I've been in the hospital ever since until a week ago, when I was sent to this temporary camp to await assignment to a permanent one. I now hobble about fairly well with the help of a stick, although I am to be a lame duck for several months to come, I believe. Needless to say, the lot of a prisoner of war is not a happy one. The hardest part of it is, of course, the loss of personal liberty. Oh, I shall know how to appreciate that when I have it again. But we are well treated here. Our quarters are comfortable and pleasant, and the food as good as we have any right to expect. My own experience as a prisoner of war, and that of all the Frenchmen and Englishmen here with whom I have talked, leads me to believe that some of those tales of escaped or exchanged prisoners must have been highly imaginative. Not that we are enjoying all the comforts of home. On the contrary, a 15-cent lunch at a child's restaurant would seem a feast to me. And a piece of milk chocolate? Are there such luxuries as chocolate in the world? But for prisoners, I, for one, up to this point, have no complaint to make with respect to our treatment. We have a splendid little library here, which British and French officers who have preceded us have collected. I didn't realize until I saw it how book-hungry I was. Now I'm cramming history, biography, essays, novels. I know I'm not reading with any judgment, but I'll soon settle down to a more profitable enjoyment of my leisure. Yesterday and today I've been reading The Spoils of Poynton by Henry James. It is absurd to try cramming these. I've been longing for this opportunity to read Henry James, knowing that he was Joseph Conrad's master. The Spoils of Poynton has given me a foretaste of the pleasure I'm to have. A prisoner of war has his compensations. Here I've come out of the turmoil of a life of the most intense nervous excitement, a life lived day to day, with no thoughts of tomorrow, into this other life of unlimited bookish leisure. We are like monks in a convent. We're almost entirely out of touch with the outside world. We hear rumors of what is taking place at the front, and now and then get a budget of stale news from newly arrived prisoners. But for all this we are so completely out of it, All of it seems as though the war must have come to an end. Until now this cloistered life has been very pleasant. I've had time to think and to make plans for a future which, comparatively speaking, seems assured. One has periods of restlessness, of course. When these come, I console myself as best I may. Even for prisoners of war, there are possibilities for quite interesting adventure in companionship. Thrown into such intimate relationships as we are here, and under these peculiar circumstances, we make rather surprising discoveries about ourselves and about each other. There are obvious superficial effects which I can trace back to causes quite easily, but there are others which have me guessing. By Jove, this is an interesting place. Conrad would find material here which would set him to work at once. I can imagine how he would revel in it. Well, I'm getting to be a very wise man. I'm deeply learned in many kinds, or better phrases, of human psychology, and I'm increasing my fund of knowledge every day. Therefore I've decided that when the war is over, I'll be no more a wanderer. I'll settle down in Boston for 9 months out of the year and create deathless literature. And for vacations, I've already planned the first one, which is to be a 3 months' jaunt by aeroplane up and down the United States, east and west, north and south. You will see the possibilities of adventure in a trip of this sort. By limiting myself somewhat as to itinerary, I can do the thing. I've found just the man here to share the journey with, an American in the British Air Force. He is enthusiastic about the plan. If only I can keep him from getting married for a year or so after getting home. I had a very interesting experience immediately after being taken prisoner on May 7th. I was taken by some German aviators to their aerodrome and had lunch with them before I was sent on to the hospital. Some of them spoke English and some of them French, so that there was no difficulty in conversing. I was suffering a good deal from my twisted ankles, and had to be guarded in my remarks because of the danger of disclosing military information. But they were a fine lot of fellows. They respected my reticence and did all they could to make me comfortable. It was with pilots from this squadron that we had been fighting only an hour or so before. One of their number had been killed in the combat by one of the boys who was flying with me. I sat beside the fellow whom I was attacking when my wing broke. I was right on his tail, as we airmen say, when the accident occurred, and had just opened fire. Talking over the combat with him in their pleasant quarters, I was heartily glad that my affair ended as it did. I asked them to tell me frankly if they did not feel rather bitterly toward me as one of an enemy patrol which had shot down a comrade of theirs. They seemed to be surprised that I had any suspicions on this score. We had a fair fight, in an open field. Why should there be any bitterness about the result? One of them said to me, "Hoffman, you'll find that we Germans are enemies of a country in war, but never of the individual." My experience thus far leads me to believe that this is true. There have been a few exceptions, but they were uneducated common soldiers. Bitterness toward America there certainly is everywhere, and an intense hatred of President Wilson, quite equal in degree and kind to the hatred in America of the Emperor. Norman Hall. End of chapter 13. Recording by Mike Vendetti, MikeVendetti.com. End of High Adventure by James Norman Hall.